Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce, as Vice Chair of the United Nations Association UK, our next speaker. We may be from different political parties, but as a former Conservative MP, we've always tried to work across the House of Commons in support of peace and security and to promote global cooperation. So I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, who is Richard Foord, the Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament. But importantly for today, he has also served in our armed forces, deploying as a UN peacekeeper to Kosovo. He will talk to us today about what the United Nations means on the doorstep. Welcome, Richard, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. A couple of weeks ago, I was seated on the green benches of the House of Commons at Prime Minister's Questions. Now, I'm sure I don't need to tell this audience that it can be a bit of a spectacle, akin to children's Punch and Judy puppet show, and time is not always given over to global governance. But unusually, on this day a couple of weeks ago, I was pleased to hear a couple of questions posed to the Prime Minister about unilateral action. They were questions about actions in Venezuela, in Ukraine, and Greenland. The Member of Parliament sitting behind me was chuntering and offering a running commentary. They said, using language a little bit stronger than I think I should use in this hall, it's never ever come up on the doorstep, international law. People couldn't care less. Later that day, I visited that MP's social media site, and they had helpfully posed a question to their followers in a clip to camera. They had polled their followers about this, and I'm going to quote from this particular MP. They talked about MPs banging on about international law. This MP said, "I want to ask you all a question. How many of you lie awake at night worrying about breaking international law?" By 10 p.m. that evening, the MP's question had garnered over 10,000 likes and over 1,500 comments. But as we all know, with polling, how you pose the question matters. What if that MP had asked, "How many of you lie awake at night worrying about food prices?" Or, "How many of you lie awake at night worrying about immigration?" Because, of course, both are exacerbated by factors that international law and UN institutions can mitigate. What if the MP had asked on social media, "How many of you lie awake worrying about rising food prices caused by climate change?" Or, "How many of you lie awake worrying about conflict-induced migration?" What if the question had been, "How many of you, when you cannot sleep, worry about war in Europe?" Then, I think the MP conducting this straw poll might have received a better understanding of why our constituents really do care about the United Nations and international law. I went to visit a scout troop in my constituency in Devon just before Christmas. After I had addressed the scouts, one of the youngsters, who can have been aged no more than 10 years old, raised his hand during questions. "Are we going to see World War III?" he asked. And it's not only the young constituents who ask the tricky questions. I'm going to quote from a note that I was sent the other day from one of my older constituents. He is someone who's never had cause to write to his MP before. He writes, "I'm reaching out with growing national and international concern. As an everyday citizen, it feels very uncomfortable and worrying. I am not a well-educated man," he wrote, "certainly not in geopolitics, and as such, I suspect I'm a fair reflection of many British nationals. I'm just living with a lot of additional worry about the direction the world is heading in, prioritizing economic growth over continuous development. This feels like a turning point in history," he wrote, And so I couldn't shake off the worry without sharing my concerns. It would be great to understand how you and your role supports our views to ensure that the government is acting on our behalf in these matters. Well, faced with this as a constituency MP, sometimes it's easier to give people examples because describing meetings or conversations in the corridor doesn't conjure the right impression of the many dynamic people who work in the UN system. I might describe my time serving in the British Army with the UN Interim Administration in Kosovo. I was working with members of the former Kosovo Liberation Army, and I was living in a flat next to a shop. One night, I woke up with a most enormous thud. A grenade had been thrown through the shop window. People in UNMIC were concerned that we might be seeing an uptick in inter-ethnic violence. The strategy coordinator for UNMIC was a Brit, a British diplomat on secondment, Sarah McIntosh. Anti-Serb graffiti had appeared on the streets, and Sarah proposed that we work with the former Kosovo Liberation Army guerrillas to fight the scourge of racist graffiti directed at minorities on the walls and windows of downtown Pristina by getting the former guerrillas in the Kosovo Protection Corps to wash it off. That is what British people would hope for. British care, British ideas, British diplomacy helping to bring peace and to contain conflict. Dame Sarah later became the Prime Minister's advisor on foreign affairs and is now the British High Commissioner to Australia. These days, I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee, chaired by Dame Emily Thornberry. And last September, we published a report about the role of the UK at the UN Security Council. We set out how to consider how effectively the UK uses its position at the UN Security Council, with a view to helping to end conflicts and advance the rules-based international order. We concluded that the UN reform agenda, UN 80, represents an opportunity that the British government should seize so as to be proactive about the future of successful multilateralism and the role that the UK can help to bring it about. All of us have a role in advocating for that. Whether it is you, by talking to your neighbours and your friends about this incredible event put on by the United Nations Association today, or me, seeking to reassure that 10-year-old Boy Scout. Yes, it is incumbent on me and my fellow politicians to talk about the relevance of the UN, not just in the committee rooms or in the corridors or in the House of Commons chamber, but on the doorstep too. We need to bring the UN into people's kitchens and into their living rooms. It makes me want to paraphrase a brilliant Monty Python clip from 1979, The Life of Brian, What Have the Romans Ever Done for Us? The populist politician asks, all right, but apart from the sanitation, the medicine, education, irrigation, the freshwater system and public health, what has the UN ever done for us? To which my constituent answers very tentatively with a question. Peace? Thank you.